Today, we're diving into one of the most powerful and influential letters ever written. Seriously, this isn't just some dusty old religious text, it's a theological explosion, a manifesto that literally sparked a reformation by laying out this radical vision for a completely new kind of humanity.
So, what if I told you that a single letter, written almost 2,000 years ago, holds a potential key to healing some of our deepest, most painful divisions today? That is the incredible, audacious claim at the very heart of the book of Romans. And to get it, we have to go back to where it all started.
Okay, so picture this. It's 57 AD in Rome, the bustling heart of the empire. And there's this small, fledgling community of Jesus followers. But they're in the middle of a crisis. The tension is so thick, the argument so bitter, that this little family is about to tear itself apart from the inside out.
Now, before we can even begin to unpack the massive, world-changing ideas in this letter, we have to first understand the very specific, very human problem it was written to solve. And that story starts with the author. And the author himself, Paul, is a total paradox. See, before he was Paul, he was Saul of Tarsus, a brilliant and zealous Pharisee who was convinced this new Jesus movement was a dangerous threat. He actually hunted down its followers. But then, he has this radical, life-shattering encounter with the risen Jesus, and it completely flips his world upside down. He goes from persecutor to apostle, a lead representative to the non-Jewish world.
And you can feel the revolutionary energy of his message from his very first words. Paul introduces himself as a doulos, a slave of Jesus Christ. Now, to a Roman ear, that was a jaw-dropping, counter-imperial claim. It was him saying, my ultimate allegiance, my true loyalty, isn't to Caesar, it's to a different king, King Jesus.
So why was this church so divided? Well, the backstory is crucial. It started out as a mixed community, Jewish and non-Jewish people worshiping Jesus together. But then, in 49 AD, the Emperor Claudius kicks all Jewish people out of Rome. So for 5 years, the church becomes culturally non-Jewish. When the Jewish followers are finally allowed back, they walk into a community that feels totally alien to them. This leads to these huge fights over things like food laws, the Sabbath. The family was broken.
So, to solve this very specific problem in this one church, Paul does something brilliant. He zooms way, way out. He's about to argue that the division in Rome is just a symptom of a much deeper, universal human condition.
Paul basically levels the playing field for all of humanity. First, he turns to the non-Jewish world and says, look, you're trapped in a destructive spiral of sin and selfishness. You stand guilty. But then, just when his fellow Israelites might be feeling a little smug, he turns to them. They thought having the Torah, God's law, gave them an advantage. But Paul says, not so fast. He argues they're just as trapped. In fact, they're even more guilty because they were given the law and should have known better.
And this is his stunning conclusion. This is the bad news. No one gets the moral high ground. Everyone, it doesn't matter what your ethnic background or religious heritage is hopelessly trapped and guilty before a just God. The problem isn't just Roman, it's human.
This diagnosis just forces this massive question into the open. If following the rules can't fix this, and your family tree doesn't matter, then what on earth is the solution? What can possibly save us?
And right here, this is the pivot point for the entire letter. After laying out the universal problem in painstaking detail, Paul finally reveals God's righteous and completely unexpected solution.
Paul announces the euangelion, the good news. Now you have to understand, in the Roman Empire, this was a political word. It was used to announce a great military victory for Caesar. So Paul hijacks this imperial language to declare that a different king, Jesus, has won a far greater victory over the true enemies of humanity, sin and death.
At the very center of this good news is God's righteousness. The Greek word is dikaiosune. And this isn't just about a moral standard that we all fail to meet. It's about God's own faithful character. It's who He is. He is just and faithful, so He acts to set things right. And that action leads to this idea of justification. Think of it like a courtroom. It's a legal term that means to declare righteous. Because of what Jesus has done, God gives us a brand new status. The verdict is changed from guilty to not guilty. We're forgiven and placed in a right relationship with Him.
So how does this happen? It happens through faith, or pistis. But, and this is so important, this is not just about mentally agreeing with a list of facts. The word means a radical trust, a deep loyalty, a pledge of allegiance to Jesus as the true King. So here's the mechanics of it.
Jesus acts as humanity's representative. He lived the life of perfect faithfulness that we couldn't, and then on the cross, he absorbed the full consequences of our collective failure. But he didn't stay dead. By rising from the grave, he conquered sin and death, opening up a new way of life that's now available to anyone who trusts him.
And to prove this has always been God's plan, Paul pulls out his trump card, Abraham, the father of the people of Israel. God promised Abraham this huge multi-ethnic family. Abraham was old, his wife was old, it seemed impossible. But he simply trusted God's promise, and in response, God declared him righteous. And here's the kicker. This happened centuries before the law of Moses was ever given. This proves that a right relationship with God has always been based on faith, not on following rules or being from a certain ethnic group.
So what's the result of all this? Well, it's so much bigger than just individual forgiveness. Paul argues that through Jesus, God is actually creating an entirely new kind of humanity. Paul sets up this incredible contrast between two figures. First, there's Adam, whose name in Hebrew just means humanity. His selfish choice brought sin and death into the world for everyone. But then there's Jesus, the new Adam. His life of faithful obedience reverses Adam's failure. His actions don't bring death, they bring life and freedom as a free gift, making him the head of a new, restored humanity. And the sacred symbol for making this transition is baptism. It's like a piece of powerful theater. Going down into the water symbolizes your old Adam-like self dying with Jesus. And coming up out of the water symbolizes being raised to a new kind of life with him. Your old identity is gone. You're part of the new humanity now. But wait, what about the law of Moses? Wasn't it a good thing? Paul says, yes, absolutely. But he uses this fantastic analogy. He says the law was like a magnifying glass. It was perfect for showing you the problem, for diagnosing the sickness of sin in your heart, but it had zero power to actually cure it. So the real solution isn't more external rules. It has to be an internal transformation. And this, Paul says, comes through God's own Spirit, who comes to live inside this new humanity, changing our hearts from the inside out. The Spirit empowers us to actually do what the law always pointed to truly love God and to love our neighbor.
And this is where the entire sweeping argument comes full circle. All of this deep, complex theology isn't just an intellectual exercise. It's the direct, practical, on-the-ground solution for that broken, divided church back in Rome.
But before he lands the plane, Paul has to address a huge, painful question that he knows his Jewish readers are asking. If this good news is for everyone through faith in Jesus, what does that mean for Israel? Did God just give up on the promises he made to his chosen people?
To answer this, Paul uses this beautiful and complex analogy of an olive tree. The tree itself represents God's covenant family through history. He says some of the natural branches, those Israelites who rejected Jesus, have been broken off. And in their place, wild olive branches, that's the Gentiles, have been grafted into the family through faith. But, and this is key, Paul insists that God has not abandoned his people. Their rejection has in some mysterious way opened the door of salvation for the entire world.
And here's where it all comes together. This is where theology hits the pavement. On the left, you have what you believe, the theology. And on the right, you see how that belief completely changes how you live. Because you're justified by grace, you serve each other out of gratitude, not duty. Because you're all part of one new family, you show humility and forgive each other. And because your identity isn't found in cultural habits, you respect each other's differences on non-essential things like food and holidays.
And this is the ultimate goal. All of Paul's incredible, intricate theology lands right here. The creation of a unified, multi-ethnic family where all those cultural divisions and arguments are healed by a genuine love for one another. A love that actually fulfills the entire point of God's law in the first place. And at the very heart of this new reality, this new family, is arguably one of the most liberating and hopeful sentences ever written. For those who are in Christ Jesus, part of this new humanity, the verdict of guilty, the weight of condemnation is gone forever. So we're left with this, aren't we? A 2,000-year-old letter written to solve a conflict in a small house church in Rome that ends up painting a vision big enough for the entire cosmos. It's a vision where our deepest, most painful divisions are overcome, not by trying harder or being better, but by receiving a radical, unconditional gift of grace. And the question for us is, what would it actually look like to take that ancient vision seriously in our divided world today?